Welcome to your go-to podcast for the pool and spa industry. My name is Tyler Rasmussen.
And my name is Greg Villafania. And this is the Pool Chasers Podcast.
Welcome to the Pool Chasers Podcast. This is episode 15. In this episode, we interview founder and co-owner of Red Rock Contractors and Red Rock Pools, Rick Chafey. This is a special year for them as this is their 20th anniversary. We know Red Rock for building some of the most incredible custom pools, but they also specialize in landscape, custom homes, commercial buildings, and even restaurants. They have built quite the reputation here in Arizona and all across the country. In this episode, we will discuss how Rick got started and how he has fully immersed himself into all areas of education, and how being educated and doing things up to code has made him one of the industry leaders. We discuss Red Rock's niche, and that's building quality custom pools and not building in large volumes. We are motivated by a company that knows exactly who they are and what they want to do. There is nothing like confidence, and we have truly learned a lot from this discussion. We strive to be on his level one day. We were on a bit of a time constraint during the talk and did not have an opportunity to thank Rick during the recording, but our cover photo and spread photos in the Pool Pro magazine were all taken at one of his amazing pool builds, and we truly so thankful for his generosity and willingness to help a fellow pool professional. Thank you again, Rick. We hope you all enjoy our talk, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Let's jump right into it.
Thank you so much for coming out here today, Rick. We really appreciate it, and we're going to jump right into this because we know you got stuff to do. It's a summertime, and everybody's super busy, but we are honored to have you here on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Anyway, so we'll first start off. Did you grow up here in Arizona?
I was born in Boston, but I've lived here since 4, so pretty much an Arizona native, especially as much as my mental capacity would know. I don't know anything really. I spent some time back east with family, but I didn't grow up there at all, so I've always been here my whole life. Grew up in Gilbert, went to Gilbert elementary schools, went to Gilbert high school, moved away a little bit into Tempe, Mesa, that kind of stuff when I was growing up, but is right back into Gilbert now, raising my own family.
Oh, nice. Do you still have family back in Boston?
I do. I've got cousins there. My wife's got some family from New York because that's where she's from, so we do a little bit of time back there. Almost all of our immediate family moved out here when I was young.
Nice. I've always wanted to visit Boston. It's like the coolest place. Go to, what is it, the Red Sox field? What do they call that wall? Fenway Park? Yeah. What do they call it? The Green Monster?
Green Monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've experienced that. My wife's from New York. I'm from Boston, so we obviously have a mixed household of Boston and New York fans. And then we've been lucky enough to do some work for baseball players. So we've got, we actually got family seats one year with 8 people for me and my family, and went and watched the Yankees play the Red Sox in Fenway. It was the bomb. Yeah. Awesome experience.
That's super
I know
awesome.
we actually went to New York for our senior trip, and I think we saw the Yankees and Tigers.
Yeah.
But the next day they were playing the Red Sox, and like the streets were just crazy. Everybody was like, they were saying like F the Red Sox and like crazy stuff. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? Are they going to start burning buildings down? Like, what's going on here?
I think they lost to Boston like 18-2 or something that same day.
Oh, no way.
Like super quiet. Everybody was like depressed.
By inning 2, it was much quieter stands.
Oh. Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners and, what it is that you do exactly?
Sure. I'm Rick Chafey with Red Rock Contractors and Red Rock Pools. We have been in business now in Arizona for 20 years. Started out originally as a commercial and residential general contractor. I mean, honestly, we started out digging ditches if we could get the job. But through the process of our time, we started being a custom home builder, slowly parlayed that into custom pools and building, and have continued that business at this point. And we are roughly 50-50 if you average years together on whether our work is construction or pools, but typically pretty half and half. Different years have different revenues, but for the most part, we do a pretty good share of both jobs and run our business that way completely. And we've been real successful. We can always turn, a simple pool remodel into maybe a whole house renovation. We've got, or just the vice versa, we can be working on a small house renovation or a new house build and turn that into both house, pool, landscaping. So it's been a pretty good way to feed business to each business and lets us do and be a little more well-versed in bigger projects and structures and construction.
Yeah, we give you guys a lot of props because doing all those different types of jobs is just insane to us. I mean, just running service and repair and having, even guys on the show that, do the pools and backyards and things like that. But to be building, I mean, you do like homes and commercial buildings and all those different things as well, right?
We do. And it's funny, we negotiate most of our work nowadays. We don't do a lot of bid work, meaning we're not chasing commercial work, whether it's construction or pools, and we don't chase a lot of general construction, but usually because of word of mouth and referrals, we've built kind of that reputation. We do a lot of really unique projects for existing clients or referral clients. And so, one client can have us. We built some hunting ranches this year. We're doing a underground gun tunnel for a client. We're doing a go-kart track for a client. We're building a custom home, and really it just came down to working for that clientele and doing very unique projects. And whether it's, we're well versed in pools, obviously, so we can tie that to our business. But it really just came down to being able to do something unique and custom and outside the box most of the time for the right clients.
Wow, that is really cool. So we're just going to jump back a little bit. You want to tell us a little bit about just how you grew up and maybe some of the things that made you, the man you are today?
I grew up in a family that didn't do construction, but I grew up in, as a young kid growing up in the Arizona market, when you started to get to that age of working, construction was that great entrance to make really good money. You had to work hard, but compared to, working at McDonald's or going to a car wash. Also growing up in Gilbert, we didn't have much industry, to speak of when I was a kid. When I first moved here, we had about 3,000 people in that town.
Oh, wow.
Now I think it's 600,000 or something.
Yeah, it's popping now.
So, we had a Circle K or a mini mart, and that was it. There wasn't, so you learn to kind of stretch out, but I really always enjoyed that piece of it once I started playing in construction. And that's really drove me through managing construction. I mean, I literally got a good degree in construction from ASU somehow. I don't know how I decided to be a professional construction worker, but when I was getting ready to go to ASU, I wasn't sure. Just like probably 90% of the world, they go to college and they pick a business, or very few go in and say, I know what I want to do. I was the same. I was, listed like good engineering kind of stuff by taking those tests and telling you what you're good at, but I didn't know what an engineer was, to be honest with you. I'm like, what does that mean? I'm going to, but I was lucky enough to get kind of pigeonholed into this thing at ASU that was construction, and it seemed like, well, that's kind of what I'm doing. It's kind of engineering, and it just fit. I mean, it really fit well. As soon as I started taking construction classes, I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student, mostly because of effort. I knew what I needed to do to get a decent grade, and I would do that because I didn't enjoy it. But once I got into construction education, it just, that it was easy to get an A because I wanted to do it. It was easy to get involved in it, and it came easy because it was something I was really interested in. That's how our business has evolved too. The home construction is still a pretty decent passion of ours, but it was obvious once we started taking over the outside environments and the pool environments and tying that together, we could easily see me and my partner were much more passionate about that piece of the business because it let us be much more creative. On the home side, especially early, we weren't designers in any way, so we were building somebody else's ideas, and really didn't open our minds to be able to start doing our own thing. But initially, like most, when you get in the outdoor environment world, you're kind of the whole deal. You got to figure out how to design it, install it, unless you're building for somebody else. And so you really start to open your creative minds, and it really helped us evolve our business. And now we're creative on both ends. We do a lot of building design and pool design. But it really, that's how we grew into what we do now as a business. And growing up here as a kid, it was a quiet neighborhood. We were in the East Valley. There was no gangs. We weren't, we didn't have to be tough and cool. We just rode our BMX bike halfway across town to see one of your friends because he lived, 3 miles away was the next house. And
what year was that?
I was born in 73. I was probably in Arizona, I think, in 77.
Okay.
So pretty much since 77, I've been living in Gilbert, out in Guadalupe and Greenfield back when it was almost dirt roads to get there and single lane. Everywhere else, no stop signs, no red lights. It was just a tiny little sleepy community, and we were, plowing hay and corn, and that was what came out of the city,
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of farmland out there for a while. Now there's a bunch of houses all built around the farms.
Yep. Yeah, farms and dairy were the main everything, and we had to go into town, come to Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, and Phoenix to really get into industry or get to stores and shopping. And it obviously is now, succumb to everything. And at Gilbert, they've got probably one of the best downtown venues that you can get to. Mm-hmm. I would say at Revels, Chandler or Scottsdale for nightlife in downtown, and they've really kind of kept a sort of a heritage feel of it, but really been able to pump it up and turn it into a cool community.
Yeah. Did you play any sports or anything when you were younger?
I did. I played sports into high school. I mistake or not, I decided once I could start making money, I was pretty well driven to make money. And as my sophomore year came around, I was playing football, soccer, and baseball. And my sophomore year, I started working a little bit. I was young. I had a buddy who drove. I graduated high school when I was 17 still, but he was driving already, so he was taking me places to work, and I had no expenses because I didn't have a car. So I was just making money. Got real, I just kind of pushed off sports, and I was okay at sports. Probably could have been quite a bit better if I had the real passion for it, but I didn't have a passion for it. I liked playing. I was decent, was athletic, but I just started working after middle through high school and stayed to that, and I've try to keep my kids from doing that, because I know you can't go back. You can't go be a high school baseball player again. Very few can play it past that point anyway, and so I feel like I missed a little bit of that, but it really helped me off in life. I was able to learn a lot early, got a lot of hands-on experience in the construction field. Wasn't just going to school and playing sports. I really early on, by the time I was going to college, had my own business, paid for my own school for the most part. My parents helped in some level, but had my own house, had 2 cars, worked 40 hours a week, and was really started business early, and probably didn't have enough fun in college, but I did, still had fun, and I've had a great life the whole way. I really appreciated what I was able to learn through that process, though, because it's easier to apply ideas and work with people in the field and direct them, even if you can also do the work or have done it. So,
how do you think you were able to do all that at such an early age? It doesn't seem very normal for a young person to just be so aggressive and want to work and make money and do all those things.
I was really interested in getting out of the house and being on my own and being self-supporting. I didn't have a terrible home life at all, but I didn't have a reason to want to be home either. I didn't have a great home life really, and so I really just wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to have to count on somebody else, and I don't know where I think that was just born to me for the most part. Really like to be self-supporting, pay for my own bills, not go home and need $10 to get lunch. I just, for whatever reason, that really drove me to get going, and I think I just lucked into an industry that kind of fit, and I was pretty decent at it. It fit what I did. I was handy, and it felt really good. And I just think I was lucky enough to do that. Some people don't run into that till their second or third career choice, and I just somehow fell into one that seemed to fit my mindset and my abilities.
That's awesome. I think we have a similar. I mean, I started working when I was 15 and a half in high school, same way. So we were working several days a week while still going to high school, trying to fit in practices, and it was difficult, but it was cool. It was definitely learned a lot at a young age, and a lot of discipline, and that hustle drive was definitely good to learn early. So it continues to grow.
I think that's the biggest thing when you're especially a teenager and you have that discipline where you're having to balance school and getting decent grades, and then sports, if you're playing sports, on top of working, a few days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is. That's a ton of responsibility on top of all the other things that come with being a teenager. You know what I mean? That's pretty hectic life. And if you can actually get through it, I think that'll make for much better, college years, adult, all those things, because you've already gotten somewhat a taste of that.
I remember when we were playing football, we had to go to school, go to practice, leave practice early, go to work. There were several times we worked till 9 o'clock at night delivering mattresses. So it was a lot and then get back up for school again the next day.
There's a lot, but you think it's a lot until you grow up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's yeah, you know what? I thought that was a lot, but man, life gets a lot more complicated.
Well, I think there's a mix of kids nowadays. I have all teenage kids now, and even with my own household of 4 kids, I got opposite ends of the spectrum of ones that want to be hard workers and really do that stuff, and ones that want to be the quote millennials. And it's weird. I think it's more instinctual than it is trainable. I mean, you can certainly train kids to do a certain thing, but and you can push them to do a certain thing, but when they do it on their own, that's really instinctful. It's not so much how much you raise them, because I've raised 4 kids in a very similar household, and I got 4 different outcomes.
Sure.
So personalities and instincts play a big role in that, I think, and environment is a huge player now in the workforce and work ethic, and we all talk about millennials and their lack of that maybe, but I think it's a mix. There's plenty of millennials that they say don't have a work ethic, but they're play baseball 8 days a week and go to 3 workouts, 4 practices, play on 2 teams, go to school, get good grades. I mean, they're really stressed, and my kids all did that. They played sports or they dance, and they really do put a lot of time into that. So it's different whether that's your work ethic or not. And I think we'll find this whole millennial generation will do the same thing. They'll come around, and most of them are starting to get to the workforce now and figuring out that if they want to keep up and be a part of it, they got to make it work. And as well, the workforce is starting to figure out how to be a little bit more flexible to their thought of an idea of how much time you should work or need to work. And
is there anything you do in particular with your kids to kind of break away from that, whether it be vacation or do more, if there's things around the house that need to be fixed, outside, inside, you guys a little bit more hands-on? You guys like to go hiking or do anything that...
Yeah, we try to spend, even now, most of my kids, I got 3 out of the house. So, we 2 years ago, I said I need to do something to get them to want to spend time with us, because not that they don't like us. There's just, we're not the best entertainment. So we bought a boat so we can get the family together. Prior to that, we would hike or vacation or travel together best we could. We always go to each other's events and sports, but when you have 4 kids and 3 play baseball and 1 dances, you get stretched around pretty far. But I think we put together a pretty good household, and they all learned from it. They all worked hard. They all, put a lot of effort into it. I think the biggest thing is letting them decide if they want to put that much effort into it. Our kids played a lot of ball on baseball side. My daughter dances a lot, and they, in my mind, way too much. But I also see parents that push their kids, and they dance the same as much as my kids do, but or play baseball. But you got to let them decide. A lot of times you get pushed too early into something, and then I think they've missed other parts of their life because kids that aren't doing those things are having more free time, and then they're going to look back and be disappointed too. So I don't know. It's so individual. I don't think there's a real easy way to pick any kid together. I think you just got to be responsible, put a good, give a good display of how you think they should live, and be a good role model. And it eventually works out. And they fall off the wagon here and there that expected, but surprisingly, they all start to come back to figure it out. And just like we did, I didn't think my parents knew anything until I was probably 30, And now I look back and like, damn, when I was 10, they knew everything,
Right. Yeah. It all makes sense now.
They could have easily foreseen all these problems. And I just, but you got to let them make those mistakes too.
Yeah. And there's so many things you don't understand. There's things that, when I was younger, I didn't really understand, but parents are probably just trying to keep things away from you because you're just too young and you don't need to know. But then you get older and you're like, man, kind of appreciate that. Probably something I didn't need to know when I was 8, 10, 15, whatever it may be. So yeah, things definitely start to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I think trying to balance the work life with the kid life, that's a huge task that you don't foresee. You don't see when you're a kid. You just see them running around doing it, and you kind of get disappointed at certain things, and you're like, well, now you definitely understand.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I see why you couldn't make that game, or you couldn't do that. Like, it's just life.
Yep.
It's crazy if you have to tell yourself that you really want it. You know what I mean? Because I pick my daughters up every day, and I have that talk with myself up to when I walk to the gate to pick her up, where it's like turn everything off, shut everything off, ask how your day was, who you hanging out with, how was lunch, how is the teacher being cool, like talk, and let's laugh together. Because it's kind of weird because I see so many, especially parents, in that moment, and it's like they're not fully paying attention. It's like you got to be there anyway, like enjoy it and slow things down, because you're going to wake up one day and you're going to be freaking 60 years old and your kids ain't going to want shit to do with you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, that's super important to pay attention to that stuff. I mean, if it means anything to you.
Well,
anyway.
I think I certainly had good days and bad days doing those things. There's plenty of times I was picking up kids to take them somewhere, and I was on the phone the whole time and barely even looked up to say hi to them. And then you're right, you drop them off, and then that finally slows down because now it's 5:30 and everybody else has slowed down. You think back, wow, I just dropped 2 kids off, picked them up, took them 2 places, and I'm pretty sure I said, hi, how are you? Right. And so the next day, you're right. You're like, okay, it doesn't matter how crazy my day was today. When I pick these guys up, I want to see them and talk to them and be there when they get home for, and you're right. The biggest thing is just interject. I try to coach baseball when they were playing baseball. I try to be at every, recital when they're doing dance. If you don't force yourself to get there and give them their time, you're right. They're like, I'm a 45 years old this month, and I've got a 22, a 21, a 19, and an 18-year-old. So,
oh, wow. All boys, or
3 boys, and the youngest is a daughter, but 3 are out of the house, 2 are in college, one's self-supporting, and the other one's finishing up high school. So, like you said, in the blink of an eye, I got plenty of time to work. I got plenty of time to spend to stress and do those things. And right now I got 1 kid at home, and I'm like, why do I have this big house? Right. So, it's a big balance in this world, especially self-employed like you guys are. You get ribbled into a lot of stuff, and you got to find a way to, and I'm better at it today than I was 10 years ago, but I should have done it 10 years ago, and start balancing that better. But I was always good to make sure when there was a high school baseball game at 4, I found a way. Hey, those days I'm leaving most of the time, unless I was out of town, I'd get there. We find a way.
Yeah.
Because you got to support them. They got to be a part of their life, because they're gone quick. And then you're like, I am. How do I get you to come hang out with us? Well, let's buy a boat at least. As soon as you say lake, they all wanted. Okay, yeah, I'll be there. I'll get work off, or I'll do whatever. So because they're working, they got careers, they got school. That 2 kids live in Flagstaff, so. It's real quick to look back and say, wow, I don't want to waste too much of that time. So it's probably the hardest thing to do is balance running your own business.
Well, who do you think had the biggest impact on you as an early age, kind of help shape who you are?
I think good and bad. I mean, my dad was, someone growing up I didn't respect really well. We didn't have a great relationship. Looking back, I realized all those things, like how hard he was working, how his life was tough. But I noticed how hard he always worked and always prepared, always provided. I never wanted for anything. And going through the construction industry and as far as work related stuff, I think I learned probably more from the wrong than the right. This industry, the pool industry, the construction industry, is not the most respected and shouldn't be. I wish it was, but when you look at how it's run, who's involved, and how they do stuff, I was early on doing a lot of stuff, probably more responsible things than I should have been given the opportunity to do. I think I pulled them off and was successful because I was really responsible for my age. But I worked for a couple contractors early on that I was able to learn tons of running tractors and equipment and construction stuff, and also learning quickly how you shouldn't run your business and treat your people, and even contracts and how you operate. A couple companies I worked for did some really, miserable things to both employees and also how they operated as ethically. And I think I learned as much from that as anything else. And I didn't really get into the pool industry because somebody brought me into the pool industry, or I saw someone said I want to do that. I got involved same reason. We were building custom homes and hiring pool builders, and man, they sucked. I mean, honestly, there's the pool industry, probably out of all construction industries, is one of the lowest bottom feeders of how easy it is to get in and stay in, even if you suck. And especially a market like this, right? It's anybody can be a pool builder today and be successful, at least reasonably successful. Even if all your customers hate you, you can still get work. There's enough pools out there. Everybody's busy. And very few put the extra effort in to be a good pool builder. And there's obviously good pool builders. It's not like I'm the standout, but it was also easy to be better without putting a whole lot of effort in. So if we put a little effort in, we'll be better. If we put a lot of effort in, man, we can eclipse some of these guys quickly.
Sure.
No matter how big they are, how much time they've been doing it. And I really do pay a lot of attention to those things. And I think I want to learn. You want to learn as much from the wrong things as the right. I didn't have a specific mentor. My dad wasn't in construction. I didn't really have any family members in construction, but I did. Since it fit me, I found a way to make the mentors in my around me, and how hard my mom worked, my dad worked, and the other people that the superintendents that worked with me on those construction companies. I really paid attention to those guys that were the people I wanted to be, as an ethical person, and how the business ran. And then slowly but surely, as I got into the pool industry and started getting an education in the pool industry, then I really started to learn who the guys were. Who should I be following? Who's doing the cool stuff? Who's breaking barriers? Who's learning and teaching? And that's what really, like I said, with college, it immediately found something that it drugged me in. I loved the education side of it. And so once I found some good education in the pool thing too, I just swallowed it. Whatever I could do, wherever I could go, however I could get that information to make me a better pool builder. I had as much fun learning it as I did, applying it.
That's a pretty interesting point, because I think us the same way looked at it, and when we first got into it, I was like, it's not very hard to be better than 95% out there. I know we work hard. We can, we're going to work as hard as we can, do what we do. And I think it's going to be better than majority. So that's an interesting point that you make. I don't think a lot of people have pointed that out, at least not on the podcast for sure.
And I want to go back real quick. What do you think makes, sucky pool builder? You know what I mean? Because we just recently left the pool yesterday, and they're actually going to be demoing the pool because this fly-by-night pool builder came in and they're nowhere to be found. There was no warranties, and the homeowner didn't know anything about, the construction or anything. So can you maybe just kind of explain what you were running into kind of back in the day?
It hasn't changed dramatically. I think there's, the biggest thing that's new now is education. But back in the day, we even hired a couple big pool builders. Big brand names in this market, and they weren't trained. They weren't experienced. They had experience, okay, but the experience was bad experience, right? You can have 20 years of experience, but if you don't improve upon that, I think you need three things to be successful. You got to have experience, you got to have an education, and then you got to have the passion to put the three together. And very few people in the pool industry, and even in construction in general. You get into the construction world, it's not most people's dream career, right? So it's the default career for a lot of people, and you get into it pretty easily. You can make pretty good money without much knowledge. You can make more than a guy that's even got a degree sometimes with no information, because you're doing hard, shitty work. Mm-hmm. But the pool industry is even an easier one, I think, and I don't know why. It's just 90% of the pool industry, 95% is subcontracted work. Most pool builders rely on the subcontractors for all the knowledge. They don't do hydraulics. They don't understand. They have an engineer they buy a set of plans for $50, but they don't know whether it actually applies to the conditions they're dealing with. They hire a plumber who plumbs the pool, and like you guys have Justin in here, who's a plumber that understands hydraulics and really knows what's going on, and like us, wants to be the best in the industry, and so he's learning how to do that through the whole process. But there's plenty of plumbers that couldn't work themselves out of a simple equation to figure out a hydraulic problem, or even understand minor losses and major losses, and they don't even know how that works, and so they're out plumbing pools, and then they hire people that even have less experience And that's the guy that lays out the equipment pad. That's the guy that decides what size suction lines are going in, because it just says equipment and pool. And, the municipality says, here's your permit. Okay, well, if nobody's going to do any oversight, the lack of oversight is probably the easiest reason to stay in the business. When you submit a set of house plans, there's an architect, there's an engineer, or at least a designer. There's a pretty good review. The people at the city understand the review. We've done, 100 or $1 million pools at the city, and we have a 17-page plan set. But if I turn that in, it's complicated for them, and they usually take too long. I can turn in a 2-page drawing that is a footprint of a swimming pool with dimensions to property lines and a box that says equipment, and they'll give me a permit. On a pool that's got 12 pumps, 3-phase power, 6-inch, 12-inch suction lines, they don't ask a single question. So what happens is you get a guy that sees that pool get constructed and sees what it looks like. Well, I can draw something that looks like that, and then he sells it to a client, and they buy it, and then he sends the plumber out there and says, "Yeah, we got to plumb this." And slowly but surely, this ball starts to fall. If we're doing kidney-shaped backyard pool with a vacuum in it and one pump and a single filter, you're right. Most guys can work through that process. But when you start stepping up into heavier duty projects, it seems like nobody seems to realize there's a limit to their abilities. And not that we didn't make mistakes early on either, because when I started building pools, I didn't know jack about building pools. I knew enough about engineering and structures and construction that I somehow knew more than the guy that was building the pools for us or the superintendent that started yesterday. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I needed to get a lot more education. And in the pool world, even some of our local big pool builders have no education to their employees at all. They teach them how to run pool studio, and now they're pool designers. Well, okay, but should we talk about what design means and what all the elements of that design? Should we have somebody in our business that can do a hydraulic plan and actually check every plan and tell them what size plumbing to use? They're not doing it. Why? Because they don't have to. And we can just build more pools and we'll deal with the problems on the road. And they do. They build 200 pools so they can deal with 10 bad pools. And the 10 bad ones are usually ones they try to do something new, unique, or different that their plumber doesn't understand and their shotcrete doesn't know about and the steel guys don't understand, and you end up with a mess. And so this industry has done that to itself a lot. And there's a number of people, Jeremy, who you've had in here, saw that when he worked at one of the bigger pool builders here, found a way to get away from that, because he said the same thing I did probably internally, like, man, if I just spend 10 minutes on the internet, I'll know more than half the guys that are building our pools, right?
Yeah.
I do that with homeowners. I usually, if I'm in a project where I'm bidding against somebody, just the sales conversation I end up having with that client before we build their pool, by the time they're done having that 2 or 3 hour meeting with me, they probably know more than pool builder A that came in here and tried to sell them a pretty picture on paper. And because I've given them an education in the process of how, when we start talking about designs and how we're going to automate it or how it's going to be chemically treated and different strengths of concrete and sizes of plumbing, we do those conversations. We're teaching the client more than the pool builder probably even understands. And often in that process, if we really, back in the day when we bid even more than we do now, the pool builder got an education too, because she would then take that information to him and he'd have to up his game but it's an industry that needs a lot of help across the globe. I do work in multiple states now. We do a lot of consulting. You're right. We see terrible project after terrible project. Some are, startups that disappear and you can't find them. Other ones are big pool builders that just don't have are not putting the effort into doing the education piece. And I think when you do that, you can be really successful. You can still suck at running a business. You can suck at customer service. You can do a lot of those things, but those seem to become more naturally as a need, right? If you don't treat the customer right, they won't pay you. If you don't have customer service, they won't. But most people don't know that they didn't get a good pool. They got a perimeter overflow pool and they got 2 pumps running, 3 horsepower, full speed all day long just to keep it running. And they're like, why is my power bill $300 a month? That same pool with the right plumbing could run at, 1 pump at maybe half speed and cost them $15 a month. They don't know any better, right? So they just think, oh, well, I bought a really expensive pool and it has to run really fast. And that's usually, opposite of the situation, because it wasn't built right, it wasn't designed right, and they're trying to make up for those missing parts. And the industry's, Jeremy, there's guys like me, there's guys like Jeremy, there's, he's got his group that does his group of builders tributary that get together and kind of help each other get better at what they do and help with design and those. And we've, I belong with the Genesis group too, that does all kinds of education to teach these guys. And I'll teach a seminar at some sort of pool, related issue, and we'll talk about education part of that seminar. And I got all these monster pool builders in the country saying, well, we need to get education. How can we get education? We need to teach our guys how, man, it's there. You're just not trying, or you're not willing to pay for it. And it's tough. It's expensive to do it right. You got to travel usually because there's not pool schools in every city. But
see, I agree on that because, and we talked about this yesterday, is I think the frustration sometimes is that the lack of education for the pool service side. Yeah, it's there, but there's still a ton of things out there that I don't think a lot of people, we're not willing to do the research. You know what I mean? The majority of pool service and repair companies aren't willing to do the research to figure out what educational programs they should go through. It just so happens programs like Genesis is just well branded. They do market, their program. They're at all the, international shows and all the different shows that they have. So you can really figure out what classes you need to take. You can see very easily on the website where to start. So I think it's being really aggressive in figuring out what it is that you want your business to be and just go head on with it. Do we need to improve upon it? Heck yeah. I think there's a ton that we need to do, but definitely think that we could all work a little bit harder in, educating ourselves.
Well, and if we work together, I mean, the service industry gets whatever crap we put out there, right? So you guys not only have to deal with pools that can operate correctly, and if you have an education to understand them, they're pretty easy to run, but you also get a pool that can operate correctly, and then you're and you got a service company that doesn't have an education. Man, you got a green pool all the time, or you got issues with it and you can't figure it out. And so when they're done right, and when the service guys understand them too. I mean, for instance, I just went to a pool that was reprogrammed by the service guy to run 8 hours a day full speed on a variable speed pump. It's automated chemicals. It's an automation system, and so it's designed to be very efficient to run 24 hours a day, and that'll help with chemical controls and everything else. Well, also the chemical controller was set up based on it would be running 24 hours a day. So how often do we check whether we need chemicals? How often do we feed? Well, as soon as you just put an 8-hour timer into a pump and run it for 8 hours at full speed, like he's done his whole life, well, you've negated a lot of these things to work, and the customer thinks they got a crappy pool. The pool service guy thinks can't keep the pool clean. What's going on? Well, we can run it for 8 hours too. We got to change some other stuff. But if you're in this industry currently and you don't understand the benefit of a variable speed pump, and you don't understand the unbelievable hydraulic efficiency of slowing a pump down, why are you servicing pools, right? Because you could make twice as much money servicing pools if you understood that too. Because when the pump goes out, you can explain why they're going to spend $1,000 on a pump instead of you putting a motor behind the existing 12-year-old pump,
right?
And leaving the old pump and volute in place. And so I would say there's maybe 5 to 10% of this industry that understands that, wants to get an education, be better at it. The rest of them are okay with just kind of running through life and getting it done, and they cause majority of the reputation issues. And it's still, even Genesis, for instance, I mean, we're not as well known as we should be. We're not as well, we don't have as much depth and spread into the industry as much as we could, and we're working on that too as a group. But it's but I did the same thing. My first negative edge pool I built, totally screwed it up. I tried to find information. I searched the internet. It was not as much internet back then. I tried to, find books on pool building. I tried to find out how do you size those basins. I talked to a couple other pool builders that we were doing work with. I talked to some of my plumbers that I was doing work with at the time, and nobody could even give me like the new, the typical rule of thumb. And so we undersized a basin. We found a way to manage it over time, but I was searching and I couldn't find Genesis then either, and they were there, right? I just didn't find them the way I was looking. I ended up at an international show one time. Went and took some free classes before the international show. There's 20 different organizations that put on 1-2 hour seminars that you can go to for free if you sign up go to the show. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting in one class that was obviously a Genesis class, and I don't remember what it was even about, but I just sat there with my jaw on the floor thinking like, who are these guys? and wow, I don't know anything. I learned two things at once. Wow, there's a place I can get an education and I don't know shit. Yeah. And so I, as fast as I could, I found a way to interject and I'm like, $2,500 for a class. They're freaking crazy. I'm not paying $2,500. Whoa, it's 24 hours, so it's 3 days. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe $2,400 isn't that bad. And all you got to do is take one of those classes and make the jump, and you sit in that class, and you're like, okay, when do I sign up for class number 2? Whether it's, and we got crazy stuff from color theory all the way down to, advanced hydraulics. Once you've taken 1 or 2 classes and realize how many things you don't understand about the pool industry and how many things you're doing wrong, you won't get enlightened to that. And prior to that, I'm just a young kid trying to tell a plumber that's been doing business for 20 years why I'm using bigger pipe and why we don't plumb it that way anymore. And like, you don't know what you're doing. I'm like, okay, but will you do it for me anyway?
Right.
Because early on, and even today, there's challenges when we try to push stuff. My shotcrete guys hate me. I want 4,000 or 5,000 PSI shotcrete. They hate me, especially in the summer. I said, so I understand you hate it. I understand it's harder to work with. I don't care because code requires it. End of story. And if we don't build it correctly for the client, then we're wasting their time. But what do we need to make it so you don't hate it? Do you need 2 guys to help move hoses? Do you need extra guys out there to help you on the line? Do we need to schedule trucks farther apart and have more expenses on truck? Like, let's work out that part instead of just saying we can't do it or it sucks.
Right.
But here's, these are guys that shoot pools for a living one of the best crews in the state, but they also are willing to default to what's easy, regardless of whether it should be done that way. And so, and majority of the industry doesn't follow that rule at all. I mean, literally, not only like 98% of the industry doesn't follow that rule. And so when we have pool failures and we get called into it on a consulting basis, we can make a pool builder look really bad really fast because their education level and their knowledge base of everything they've completed for the customer, we can shoot holes in it, 10 different holes in 5 minutes. And then they sit back and say, okay, well, what do we got to do to fix our problems? Instead of fighting like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. We got to fix that part of the industry and start training people that way. And as well, working together like builders and service guys. I saw some stuff on the internet yesterday with you guys, like what questions would you ask? And guys, how come we don't have, a vacuum in every pool? And it's ridiculous that you don't have a vacuum in every pool. It's also ridiculous you don't have proper skimmers in every pool. But I'll ask you too, why do you have a vacuum pool and a main drain? If you're going to have a vacuum pool, you don't need a main drain. You're wasting plumbing, drains, suction devices, and majority of people have the drains almost completely off. Yeah. So the vacuum works and the skimmers work. Well, there's a million better ways to plumb that pool, but everybody puts a main drain in, right? And even the counties, we got an indoor swimming pool. We have to have the same amount of skimmers on an indoor pool as an exterior pool if it's a commercial pool. Well, we obviously don't have the skimming load that we would have in an outdoor pool and an indoor pool, but we got to flow all this extra water to manage all these skimmers. They're still pushing back on Venturi skimmers, which work dramatically better and use less water. But it's all those different things that as a group, as we continue to keep learning and working together and listening to service guys so we can build a pool that you can service, and then building a pool that will last a long time and be very efficient. But it's a struggle. That's the biggest struggle our industry will have and continue to have. We got to keep up in the education. We got to get people willing to go to education, and we got to make it, I guess, more, we got to make it harder for you to survive in this industry if you don't. And the municipalities will slowly pick that up. There's different municipalities from LA and Florida and some in Texas now that are really starting to require some stuff, but even then it's misguided often. But if they don't, they don't make us check pump size to hydraulics in Arizona anywhere, right? Unless it's a commercial pool. So the industry went to variable speed pools, right? And so what did we do? We went and put a bunch of 3 horsepower pump on 2-inch plumbing. And then we ran them for 8 hours at 3,450 RPM. So the customer's now paying probably 4 times what it would cost to run that pool properly, and they thought they got a more efficient pool. Yeah. But it doesn't work that way.
I think the homeowners and whoever's buying the pool is also part of the problem too, because I think a lot of them are being warned, just being in the pool service and repair side of it, what's the cheapest way to go? Mm-hmm. That's not everybody, and we usually will talk them out of that because we're like, the cheapest way is actually not the cheapest way because you're going to pay for it. If we put a refurb motor, we put a new motor on this, 15, 20-year-old pump, like we're going to be charging you for a whole new pump in 6 months, a year or something like that. So it's a lot of different things like that where even for the building side, you could probably be trying to pitch them on a pool build that is the right way to build it. But they're like, okay, I'm not paying that. How can we cut that cost in half? You don't want to do that, but we could cut this out, and you can pay, whatever's in your budget. Okay, let's do that. And when they do that, you're really sacrificing a lot. And when the service guy comes in and the homeowner's having to deal with problems with their pool in the future, it's like, why is this happening? It's like, well, because you didn't build it right.
Yep. Luckily for us, we are, we've moved ourselves away from the part of the industry that's so bottom line driven. As far as we're not a production builder, we don't even want to be. We're not, because we're not good at it. Production builders are better at being efficient and managing their jobs that way. We suck at that. We couldn't make money doing it for sure. And we've gotten, luckily, to a point now that a reputation usually precedes us to we're not negotiating dollars and cents to the smallest dime anymore. But we certainly have been in that part of the industry early on, and we understand that. But you're absolutely right too. The consumer drives a lot of that because we're trying to keep. They drive the ability to stay in business as being a bad pool builder because they bought the cheapest pool, and being transient as a country. People like in Arizona, people don't have their house very long anyway. So Does it really matter that this pool is going to last me 20 years? Shit, man, I'm out of here in 2. So what's the cheapest pool? Looks like a pool in the backyard. When I sell my house, it'll have a pool and I can swim for a couple of years. And when it's falling apart in year 4, I don't care. And so it's overall, it's tough, but it's also for us, it's made our life, it's better for me because it's easy to be successful in what we do, and provide an air of interest to good clients.
Yeah, what I thought was super interesting, you said like go back to that service guy that programmed the pump for 8 hours on a system that should run for 24. I mean, I'm sure he's just a tech, but I mean, where was it? There should be a line where it's taught how that system actually works. You know what I mean? Like you guys set up this system and it's supposed to run for 24 hours. This podcast has opened up our eyes to looking at pools in a whole different way for sure. Once we started talking to the builders and understanding these concepts and like, well, maybe we're struggling with this pool because it's actually not done correctly, as opposed to, hey, we just need to run it longer or dump more chemicals in it or drain it, or, there's always now some type of like, hey, there's a real reason why this isn't working. So let's kind of figure it out. As before, it was just kind of like, well, this is how everything works, and it should be like those pumps should be running at a low speed for 24 hours. And that's hard to explain to a customer, I think, because they're like, I don't want something running for 24 hours. But you're actually spending the same amount of money running it for 24 hours as you are running it for 8 hours on 3450, and those systems are designed to constantly feed chemicals. And that's why you're having to shock the pool every time you go to it, because there's no chlorine in it, with everything is dropped down or bottomed out because it's supposed to be running for 24 hours, not 8. It's definitely, I mean, understanding how things work definitely would help all that.
Well, when we turn a pool over, we very 90% of the time, obviously we do a startup with a client too, but we usually try to get whoever they're going to use for service there. Mm-hmm. Because we know, depending on who that might be, they can understand or not understand how to run a pool. Sometimes it's tech guys. Sometimes it's, the guy that owns his own business has 46 pools and he just knows I got 20 years of doing this, young chap. I know what I'm doing.
All right.
Well, if you don't keep up with current situations, you can't run a pool the same way we used to. 20 years ago, you're right. Bigger pump, fast as we can go, move the water in 8 hours, make that work. The counties are still the same way. They make us give them, when we do county health stuff, we're still using these archaic methods of doing turnover and what the turnover needs are. And always the solution is more turnover. Well, that does make sense in general terms. But, even back to your client, how do you explain that to a client? Well, to be honest, if we turn the same amount of water over in 24 hours as we turn over in 8 hours, we'll actually do it for about 80% less money. Huh. Because velocity is when you slow water down, you get efficiency exponentially, right? So, right. So the idea of slowing it down and running slower actually is way more efficient. That's, you'll see Pentair and Jandy, they'll even post that their pumps can be 80% more efficient. They absolutely can. You have to slow things down and you have to size appropriately so you can slow it down. Both the speed of the pump and the velocity in the pipe. The velocity in the pipe is where the money is saved. But you're right. If the client doesn't understand it, they're not going to want their pool running 24 hours a day. If the pool guy doesn't understand it, he won't want to deal with that either. He thinks I need to run fast and hard all the time, or at least longer. So if the pump's not getting clean in 6 hours, I'm going to put it to 10 hours. But if the equipment's automated and the chemicals are automated and they're programmed thinking it's 24 hours, it can work in 10. We just have to tell everything we're doing it now in 10. Sure. And we can work around time of use, for in-floor cleaning systems where we got to speed up. There's very good ways to do that. Most guys in the industry, both on service and pools, haven't done that understanding and don't explain it to the clients. We're pretty good at explaining it to the clients. I think most of it goes over their head. But I've got a pool. I got a text this morning. I got to go back and explain to the client again why we're running 24 hours, and because we've explained it, but they still don't get it. They just think it's running. It's costing me money.
All right.
When you can understand the hydraulics and you can explain why it works that way, then you start to get a better general understanding of it. And that's the part that pool builders and designers, right? We're going to call them designers, should be doing.
Yeah. Even the chemicals. I mean, understanding like when people are like the salt, they put these salt systems in and they're like, yeah, it should be feeding. This pool should not have chlorine issues but yeah, you're running that pool for 6 hours and the only time it gets chlorinated is when it's running.
Right.
So, when you put, chlorine floater in a pool, it's got chlorine constantly fed for 24 hours. And then now you are now limiting that and you plumbed in something that it's only feeding that pool for 6 hours. It's not going to produce that way.
And it can't keep up. And the lack of circulation for those other 16 or 20 hours a day is causing all kinds of issues between the thermal plane changes. So once the water gets hotter, the chlorine's burning off the top faster. Pockets that are really shallow get really hot. All these things start to come into play. And so when we start designing a pool from start to finish, we can solve a lot of those issues, and so and they don't, same thing with like skimmers, right? We're a huge proponent of Venturi skimmers, right? We don't even plumb a vacuum line into our skimmers ever anymore. There's no suction on a skimmer that we build currently, because
you're talking about like the quick skim type of
either quick skim, Paramedic makes one, A&A makes one, Waterway makes one. So when you understand skimmers, we want about 60 gallons a minute to make a skimmer work, to actually get the weir to come down and actually draw things into the skimmer. 60 gallons a minute. Well, most pools should have 2, okay, depending on the size. Sometimes I have more. Well, that would be 120 gallons a minute to make your skimmers work. Okay. Well, now what do I have for floor drain, if there is one, or what do I have to run my vacuum? Well, now I really am running a pump at massive speeds to get a vacuum to work or an in-floor system to work and get my skimmers working. Mm-hmm. Well, then we slow down, right? Let's go for 24 hours a day. So we'll slow it down part of the hours. Well, if I slow down, my skimmers don't do anything either. So now I'm just moving water kind of for the reason to move water. It's a little bit better. But a Venturi skimmer gets about 60 gallons worth of skimming capability with 10 gallons of water. So let's take that same pool, put a pump running for 20 gallons a minute. I'm getting 100% of skimming out of 2 skimmers for 20 gallons a minute. Now I also want to get some other movement of water. Maybe I've got, a main drain, or maybe I've got a vacuum I'm running. So we slow the pool down and it runs 16 or 18 hours at 40 gallons a minute, which is going to cost you pennies, literally pennies, because now you can't even tell the pump's on. That's the other usual complaint of the client, is it's too loud. Well, if we're running at 40 gallons a minute, we're at 1,200 RPMs or something. We're barely moving. You can't even tell the pump's running. Right. And the skimmers are kicking ass. And all the stuff that hits the surface goes through the skimmer. Now I don't have a problem with stuff on the floor of the pool. And when I ramp them up, they're even working better.
So you put them on their own pumps then? Or how does the Venturi type?
So the Venturi will be on the filter pump. So the filter returns. We also don't put a lot of returns in our pools.
Oh, it's in the return side?
It goes on the return side, okay. Yeah. So you're sending 10 gallons a minute to it.
I see.
Now, you got to understand that, though, because if you think you're going to put stuff in the skimmer that ends up in a filter like DE, right, that obviously doesn't work, because if you dump DE in a Venturi skimmer, it's going to dump it all in the pool on you, because we're pushing all that water that comes in the skimmer goes back to the pool. But we can set up a pool to operate at 30 gallons a minute and get full skimming capability 24 hours a day. And that's huge in a market where you got leaves and debris all the time, right? And then if we have an in-floor system or a vacuum, we speed up for a couple hours to manage that issue. And when we do that, we skim for sure, but we're skimming all the time. And so you get a lot of operating capacity out of understanding how the pool should work. And we can run pools so slow and so simply and get real good chemical feeding, right? We need enough to make the chemical system know it's on. We can spread out our chemical, how often it checks for chemicals and how often it feeds the chemicals over 24 hours too. And we're not, like you said, we don't have to try to catch up at 8 a.m. when the pump turns on and go, wow, we're way out low on chlorine, max out the chlorinator, and see what we can do to get chlorine in this pool. And it never catches up. And so it's just, the pool guy shows up, shocks the pool again, or adds a floater to a pool with a chlorine generator, and to a client who thinks they have a chlorine-free pool, because that's what the sales guy told them, right? So all across the board, we've got this mess.
Yeah. I don't use chlorine.
Right. Yeah, I got chlorine-free pools because I have a salt pool.
Right.
But we also learned that with the salt pools like in Arizona, if you don't control the salt system by demand, you're not benefiting very well either, because that system's set wherever the last guy decided it needed to be, meaning probably in the worst case condition in the middle of summer. So it's ramped to 100% and it runs for 6 or 8 hours, whatever the guy's got his pool set up for. Well, now that system cannibalizes itself in the process. Yep. It also increases the pH, right?
Yeah.
So we're fighting ourselves through that whole process. We destroy the cell. It never gets to its warranty period. A normal cell in Arizona will probably last you 1.5 to 2 years.
Right.
Because it devoured itself. Now, if you tie that to a system that calls for demand, now guess what? As it cools down and there's no bather load, I'm not at 100%. I might be at 10% or 50%. So now the system actually will last for a much longer period of time. And when the pH climbs, we handle that because we're injecting some acid to it.
Sure.
There's very simple systems like that. When you explain that to a client, yeah, you're going to spend an extra $2,000. But I'm going to tell you, your chlorine generator is going to last you probably 5 years. So that's a $1,500 bill you're not going to pay in 1.5 or 2 years or 3 years, depending on where your pool builder currently is, because he probably ran out on you. And so the warranty might not be there. There's very simple things. And I think when you get the right service company managing the right design of a pool, you end up with a lot better results. But that same pool is between 3 other pools on that same street that have none of those things. And so to try to make sure people understand the difference makes it tough.
So back to, your company, Red Rock, what do you think differentiates, your company from other ones? And, what makes you guys really stand out? Because, we're all over your website and different things like that. And you guys have like really good warranty programs, and it seems like everybody's very well educated. So you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
I mean, I think our goal has always been to make sure that we know what we're talking about, we know what we're selling, and we educate ourselves to be better than everybody else if we can. I mean, we're certainly not the best in the world. We want to be, and that's what drives us to do all those things. I think that many companies get complacent in their abilities, and a guy that's been building pools for 20 years and hasn't got an education, or a guy that's been building houses for 10 years and never learned the new things in housing, you can be successful, but are you going to be the most successful? I don't think so. And we learned our company, we didn't want to be in that grinder mix of trying to compete with everybody. So and the best way to run any business is find a way to get no competition. So when we evaluated the building market and the pool market, and it sounds good. Hindsight, it sounds like we really planned this, but I think it just kind of happened through the process of running our business. But when we started building pools, we looked at the market at some level and said, well, I could list 10 or 15 really good custom home builders in Arizona, right? And good names, good reputations, do awesome projects. And then I sat back and said, let me name some really good pool builders that I could list. I'm like, I can't, and at the time, this is, 15, 18 years ago. And not that there wasn't any around, but I didn't know who they were or what they were doing. And it was easy to say, man, if I just do a little bit of extra effort, comparatively speaking, I can be way better than these guys in a minute, versus if I want to be the best custom home builder in Arizona, I got a pretty big hill to climb. Right. To be one of the best pool builders in Arizona, the hill was pretty short, man. I just had to jump one hurdle pretty much, and the rest of them are, tripping over themselves still. And so our goal was, let's separate ourselves in what we do. And over time that evolved, right? We got better, and we still don't know what we're doing. We're just, now, how do we learn? So we went and figured out, let's learn about design, what design is, not how to run a software program. Let's learn who architects are. Let's learn about architectural styles. Let's learn about hydraulics. Let's learn about, structural stuff more than we already know. Let's understand the concept of mass and scale and how everything fits together in architectural programs, and learn how to work with the other professionals in the design world so that we become designers. Not software operators. And I think our industry doesn't do a great job of that, because trust me, there's some pool companies that have awesome conceptual design guys. They're some of their projects I see pictures of blow you away, and I'm constantly impressed with some of the projects put on by local pool builders all the time. However, when you go to those pools, they're also my best sales tool. Like I use model center pools all the time to screw over the pool builder that built that pool. Because when the client comes to me in a neighborhood, like a new high-end subdivision wants us to build their pool, we start talking about the fact that we're probably more expensive than the builder's pool builder. Like, I really like that pool in the model center, so we are kind of thinking about using them. I said, you know what, let's meet at the model center. Let's go to that pool. It's not very hard to show them how bad that pool was built, especially the high-end places, because they start trying to do Lautner edges, perimeter overflows, and these really cool concepts with no idea of how they're really supposed to do them, right? The designer knows what it looks like, and on paper and on the computer program, it looks great. But the plumber, the electrician, the superintendent, the manager of the jobs, they don't know how that works. And so you can stand there with a client at that pool and show them why water's spilling out over the edge, and there's mold growing in these coasts between the steps, and the stone's already deteriorating because it's flooded into the water. You can really start to break down that pool pretty fast and go, so you can buy a pool from these guys. Go for it. You'll save some money. It'll look awesome from the back patio, but it won't be long before you're chasing your tail trying to solve all its problems. And we can overcome all these problems in our design process because we're planning for it. You know what I mean? And so I think that's what really separates ourselves from those guys, is that we've always taken the challenge. When somebody gives us something we don't know how to do, we say yes, but then we actually went and figured it out, right? Many people take that challenge and say, oh yeah, we can do that. And they sort of wing through it, right? And they hope that the plumber understands some of it, and they hope that their designer, can figure out parts of it in the field. And they rely on all these people that don't have any more experience than they do. And so it's about learning how to do those challenging things, and that's makes it very easy for us to do what we do and separate ourselves from the balance of the market. There's guys like Jeremy, guys like me, guys like Skip Phillips and Brian Van Bauer, and all the big players that you guys see in the market now that are members of Tributary, members of Genesis. There's local builders here. Roger Soares with Hydroscapes. They're big Genesis guys that learned stuff way back when, early days. They don't do a ton of projects. They don't do a ton of big projects, but man, their projects are pretty spot on because they understand all those little details, how to do glass tile correctly, how to manage the hydraulics, how to worry about the construction details. And that's what's made us separate ourselves from everybody else, is that long term our projects hold up structurally, hydraulically, and that integrity follows you around, right? You either are that guy or not. And we're the most expensive pool builder in town, or at least one of them. If we're competing against another builder that's at any average level or below, we tell clients right up, if this has anything to do with money, don't waste either of our times. We are going to be 20% maybe more higher than those guys. Even if it's the same looking pool, it won't be the same pool. It might look the same. So, and then hopefully we pride ourselves in that our own designs and our concepts and the ideas that we put on paper that are hopefully different have gotten us that call too, right? I mean, in the world of the internet and Pinterest and Instagram, it's really easy to mimic what other guys are doing, and we didn't used to see all that stuff. If you weren't a consumer of magazines and travel, you wouldn't see any of that stuff. Now, we're seeing projects in Dubai, we're seeing projects in Europe, we're seeing stuff in LA, stuff we would have never seen. And all those are trickling back into the system, into the business and the industry. And guys are using computer programs that can make those pictures, and they're selling off a picture, and they don't understand the complexity of it. So the separation becomes, how do you be the guy that people are looking at? And that's not easy. And sometimes we're that guy, and oftentimes we're influenced by somebody else's designs and ideas to come up with a twist on that. But majority of the industry just mimics something else. We want a column with a walk pot and a scupper. Okay. And a lot of clients want that. It looks great. There's nothing wrong with that. But how do you do something that isn't that and make it look great? And that's the key that gets our business is, at least we pride ourselves that that's what it is. Maybe it's not that. Maybe we're just lucky, but at least we feel like we've done as much as we can to be those guys, and make sure that when we meet with a service guy on the pool side of a pool, turning the pool over in front of a client, we know hopefully as much as he does about how to service a pool at some level. We're certainly not a service contractor, but we understand the struggles. I have my own pool. We had serviced pools in the past, and so we do our best to listen and pay attention and answer those questions. And why have we done, or why did, we've built pools without vacuum lines in them. Why do you need those? We got in-floor. Okay. You got a party in 2 hours and there's a dust storm just showed up, right?
Right.
Maybe the in-floor is not the best plan. Or whatever might be the issue, but
or at least allowing to bypass it to vacuum properly.
Right. So we've learned too in those days of, we listened to somebody that came in and told us that. I'm like, you're right. Every pool needs to have a vacuum. Some of our pools have 6 vacuum ports on them because they're huge.
Right.
We don't want to put a 75-foot hose and try to drag it around a pool. We need to get access where we need it.
Sure.
And each elevated body could use its own vacuum usually, because the hardest thing, you got a vacuum in the lower pool, but you have a pool above it. How do you get the vacuum to work up there? You can do it, right? You've done it. You've dealt with it, but it sure sucks, right?
Yeah.
And that one seems to be the one that's always dirty and it doesn't have the vacuum in it. So,
yep.
Our goal is to keep improving. I think if you're always improving and you don't get too placated in what you're doing, I think you can be real successful, because as soon as you kind of slow down that charge of trying to be the best and getting all the information that you can have inside you, you'll be leapfrogged. And, somebody's going to be working harder than you and being smarter. Gary Vee talks about that all the time. The only reason he's more successful, he's outworking you. That's why, he's not not working. He's not bitching about not having a job. He's out hustling. While you're complaining about how come Red Rock keeps getting all the jobs? Well, are you doing the things Red Rocks are doing? Maybe that's what you need to do. What are these guys doing that are super successful? That's how guys like me and Jeremy have got into this business. We're younger than maybe the majority of those big boy players in like Genesis. But we saw what they were doing and said, well, we need to be as good as them, but I want to be better than them. And I'm colleagues with all those guys and I'm friends with them, and they all are still improving all the time. But whoever hustles the hardest, is going to be the most successful at some level. And as long as you keep that hustle, you can stay ahead of the market at some level, or at least keep up with your competitors.
Definitely.
Thank you guys so much for listening so far. We truly appreciate your time and your ear. We know it is important, so we will jump right back in with Rick here shortly. I just wanted to mention a few things first. Number one, we've started a Facebook group for the Pool Chasers community. This has been so great so far. It's about 2 weeks old now, and we have seen so much excitement about it, so much positive engagement in there. There's a ton of sharing of knowledge, and it's just a place where all of us can come together to learn and share and grow with one another as a Pool Chasers community. So thank you for everyone who's joined already, and we look forward to more and more people joining and making that group better. So thanks again for taking the time to check that out. Number 2, I just wanted to kind of talk about the Reflections episode one more time. This is how you kind of get Pool Chasers merchandise or swag. You go to poolchasers.com, click the feedback form, fill out the feedback form, donate if you would like, select what you would like us to ship you. We will ship you the product. And then obviously we would love if you would share, a picture of you or your truck or something with the Pool Chaser swag on it, so we can share it on our social media as well and keep building the community of like-minded individuals. So also we got some super exciting surprises coming up here shortly. Do not want to miss it. Please stay tuned to all of our social media platforms, and the next couple episodes will definitely be sharing some exciting news with you guys. So keep up the great work out there, guys, and we will jump right back into it after a word from our sponsor.
What's going on, everybody? This episode is brought to you by Jobber. Jobber is by far our favorite tool for collecting deposits, payments, scheduling customer jobs, and assigning tasks to a specific person on our team. If you're looking for a better way to stay organized, this is it. I don't even know how we did things before Jobber. If you have any questions, their customer service team is out of this world. Jobber is so cool that they are hooking up all of our listeners with a free 14-day trial. Just visit getjobber.com/poolchasers. That's getjobber.com/poolchasers. Try it out. We promise you won't be disappointed.
And do you find it difficult, and this is maybe what separates you from companies that aren't doing as good a job, is actually being on the job sites and making sure that everybody is kind of doing what they're supposed to, being accountable for their job? Because if you're subcontracting certain things and maybe there's other builders subcontracting using the same subcontractors, like because you're not the one physically, doing the work. I mean, I'm sure if you had to, you would, but what does your day-to-day look like?
It's a constant struggle. Actually, I was having a conversation with my partner today. The good thing is we've had kind of an opposite goal in our industry. I spoke at a PACE program like 10 years ago, it seems now, and that was my first one. It's a program where like the top 50 pool builders get involved and come to a meeting to learn about business and help each other be better at business. And it's put on by Paramount and Buzz Giz, used to be a local heavy hitter pool builder. And the first one of those you ever go to, you have to introduce yourself to the rest of the crew. And I was like the third guy to do it that day. And everybody before me we do 150 pools a year, and we're trying to do 400, or we're doing 10, we want to do 50. And I didn't have a speech prepared. I was just, my name's Rick and my name's Red Rock, and I'm gonna go sit down. But before I got up there, I said, I went up there and I had a plan in my head. I said, here's my goal. I think I'm going to do 12 pools this year. God damn, I want to do one. That's all I want to do. Because if it's the right pool, I don't need more than one. And luckily for us, our business, we don't do volume. And so we still do those struggles. I'm not on every job. I do have employees. Obviously, we got like 20 employees, and we do a lot of different type of work. But we still try to stay as engaged as we can, because the subs we subcontract most of our pool work just like everybody else. But we also had to train the subs to do our work, and the way we want it done, it's different. Oftentimes, and we're more particular about some things. We from shotcrete strength, plumbing sizes, lining stuff up. I argue with in-floor companies because they spread we got a square pool and they've got 4 heads that somehow aren't in line with everything else. I want them lined up. Well, it won't work as good that way. So, let's talk about why it won't. Let's figure out a way around it. But the idea of if you get too big for yourself, right, and you have to start stepping away for sure. And as soon as you do that, if you haven't built the culture, then it doesn't follow, right? If the culture is different, that'll kill you. And so I think I spend 50% of my time in my business on the culture side, right? And my partner spends maybe that exact amount of opposite time more in the field, making sure the culture's happening, right? And even his culture is slightly different than mine. So sometimes we got to, knock heads a little bit on something simple, but it's critical if you want to be successful in what your passion was. You can't get too big, and when you do, you got to have a culture that really stands behind what you're doing. So what do? Well, we're educating the guys that work for me. Got an engineer that works for me. He's gone to half a dozen Genesis classes already. He's starting to teach some Genesis classes. I've got designers that not only understand the software we use, but they are starting to take the same classes. I got a guy that just does, more conceptual design and drafting for us, but he's going to take hydraulics. Why? Because I need him to understand the idea behind the systems and ideas. And my project manager that does most of our project management has taken the basic construction, but he's going to take advanced construction. I know the information. I got the book sitting on my desk. I can tell him, but I need him to hear it from everybody and be that same understanding and culture and want to be doing what we're doing. If we don't do that, we'll start to spiral out of control. And if I step away, I'll seem successful on paper probably because we're doing work, we're making money, but we'll slowly be less successful, I think. And that's just us being lucky enough to have kind of verged into the market that we're in because we don't do volume. Me and my partner sell every job. We don't have salespeople. We don't sell jobs by bringing a pretty picture. We sell design contracts. Then we design the job. Then we sell the job. And we get paid to do that. We don't do it for free because we're not working on commissions and hoping. So it's a different building or, different business model, but that's what's helped us stay ahead, I think, or stay near the top, and I think that we got to keep remembering that. The other thing that's hard to do, and I know we struggle at it for sure, I'm not pretending we don't, is to remain humble, right? Remember that you don't know everything. Remember that you're not the smartest, and remember that you have a lot to learn. And oftentimes I probably, step over that line and have to be corrected either by my wife or my family or my employees. And you got to keep remembering that as you get really good at stuff. If you become Frank Lloyd Wright, for instance, maybe one of the most best renowned architects, mostly because he kept telling everybody that more than he really was, but he had a lot of people around him that also made him look really good. But he's the biggest arrogant prick you could ever meet. Nobody liked him. Everybody hated him. Yeah. Because he forgot to be humble, and when you forget that, you start stepping over stuff that you shouldn't. Guys saying, falling water, his best thing in the world, would have been a structural failure beyond belief. It's still got some structural issues, but luckily the two guys he had on that project went against his wishes and did the right thing in the field to a point. Otherwise, that thing would have fell down. He'd be an utter failure. And it was because he was so arrogant about his abilities and his concepts that it had to be his way and couldn't stop to listen. And so that's a huge piece of staying in this business when you get good at it. And we have our struggles inside our own Genesis group, and other groups have it in their groups, and everybody in the industry can do the same thing. If you don't remember to be humble and make sure that when you're getting questioned that you don't just blow it off and you sit back and go, you're right, I need to look at this differently. We're doing this wrong. We could do this better. Or treat people differently or whatever that might be.
That's a very good point. Can you kind of go through it and share with us your pool building process? How when you show up to a pool, walk through clients, how that kind of works?
Yeah, I started that a little bit in the last segment was, we don't sell projects by pictures. And we don't bid projects off of pictures typically. We'll put a budget together maybe, but the industry's sort of backwards, I think. We send a sales guy working off a commission who can do awesome stuff on software to meet a client. He probably hadn't had the opportunity to learn about hydraulics, pool equipment, how it should function, what things might cost. And he puts a pretty picture together, and sometimes they're awesome looking, right? And then sells off of that, and then the pool builder figures out on the back end how to make all that work. And in the right market, that obviously works for their business model. My model is different. Me and my partner are the face of our business. We meet the clients personally. We even try to, figure out before we go to the project if they're even the right client for us, right? It used to be 50-50. The client has to pick us, we have to pick them. Now I think it's probably more like 75% on our side. Is this the right client for me? We've taken a lot of clients we knew weren't our clients and figured we'd get it done, and we weren't as successful as we wanted to be. So choosing your client helps a lot, and I think we do that very well. At this point, we've got a pretty good feeling for people.
How do you tell the ones no that you don't want to work with?
It's not so much no. It's usually kind of a different agreement between the parties of understanding what we do and how our business works and what they're asking for. And if we can't deliver, like I said, you have to be humble. I'm not the best guy to build a $100,000 pool. Just not. I can build a great $100,000 pool, but I'm not the best guy for most clients at that level. And we do a lot of $100,000 pools. I'm not saying we don't do that. I'm just saying, but at that level, there's guys that can do a lot for $100,000 and do a decent job of it for the client. It's a client that's young. They're going to be out of that house in a couple of years. They got only a certain amount of money to spend. They want bang for their buck. That's not my right client. We work for general contractors and builders. They're spec homes. If it's a real high-end spec home, I'm the right guy. If they're trying to turn and burn and flip a house, I'm the wrong guy. I'm going to bury 20 or 30 grand in the ground that nobody gets to see. That doesn't sell a house. Right. So we got to recognize that, right? And so we usually do our best to refer them to somebody that we think fits their scenario better. And we try to get our website and social media geared towards that too. So it's kind of an obvious thing, but we get the $30,000 homeowner that wants that pool and sees our website and kind of haven't separated the two. And we have that conversation with them.
Educate them
and walk them through and say, like I said, it's just not the right fit. And so we got to be the right fit for the job. And that's the first piece of the world. And then we sell a design contract, just like a landscape architect does. He doesn't sell a pretty picture and then do the design work. He says, you're hiring a designer. We're professionals. Not only are we actually educated in design, not only do we have engineers on staff, we have, literally $100,000 worth of software that we build our programs off of, not one that we paid $99 a month for. Because we work almost everything in Revit. We work with high-end architects all the time that way. And so there's a whole other process to our business. So we put together a design contract to design them their pool project. And that also works on jobs that we're not the right builder for, because we let them own those. So we design a lot of pools we don't build, and especially in different states. We do a lot of work out of state design-wise. We're not going to build that pool. We're going to design it for the client. So even locally, sometimes we design a project and we don't build it. We don't even intend to build it. We let them get somebody else to build the pool. We do the design work. So they're willing to pay for the right way to do it and the right design, especially if they like our style. But maybe we're not the right builder at the time. And so from there, we design a pool and complete a set of designs way past normal conceptual. We don't necessarily do all the CDs and all the hydraulics and all the engineering, but we get a long way down the road of design in that process for the client. And then we start pricing and working a budget. And then we go to build the pool, but we follow all of our basic philosophies and how our sheets look and what our plans look like. We lay our, for instance, equipment sets. We've laid that out in a model most of the time, especially if it's interior type work. If we're doing an interior equipment room, we don't stub 700 pieces of plumbing in there and stub it up in the center of the floor and come back 3 months later and figure out where the pumps are going. We have designed that room with a pump that's the right size of the pump, with the unions on the pump, with the 90s, with the valves, with the pumps and filters. So I can cut a section through a floor and tell you where every pipe needs to show up in that room, so that we're not moving stuff around, crossing it over after the fact, or having to stack things and make it not work, and try to make sure we can get access to the filter and the skimmer basket on the pump. And so those things start to come into play on higher end projects quite a bit. And those details matter, and it makes a long-term better project for everybody else. So we're able to do those things. And that's what you're paying for when you're paying for, design work we do. And then we build our pools to the level we think they need to be built at. Waterproofing, we do way more waterproofing than 90% of the pool world does.
What is that exactly?
Well, it's like raised bodies of water and how much waterproofing we do to concrete shells and under, when we got raised body of waters and negative edge walls and stuff. We do elevated pools that are on top of roofs. So we have a whole level of waterproofing we do depending on the project. Sometimes there's 4 or 5 different methods in the same area of a project to make sure it's done correctly.
That's basically like making sure the water doesn't damage things. Or what's waterproofing?
Like one of the biggest failures we see in Arizona pools, or at least local pools, is people doing negative edge pools, right? And they don't waterproof correctly. And the backside of that pool is all covered in scale and efflorescence and stuff. And
all of them,
right? But part of that is mineral deposits from the water. Most of that is not. Most of that is moisture pushing through that shell. And blowing the tile off the wall or pushing moisture through the grout lines, and all the efflorescence is coming out of the structure, and the structure fails over time. Some builders and some plastering companies will do a waterproofing system of some sort where they'll put Thurasil or something on the inside of that wall. But if you actually call the manufacturer a Thurasil, they will recommend you don't use it in a pool. Okay, but that's what most companies use. So there's 20 other options to use there. There's integral waterproofing systems we put in the concrete. There's penetrating waterproofing systems we can do after the fact. And there's membrane systems we can do. And every situation is different. But that's, most of the pool failure work we go back to figure out for people is these raised glass spas or a raised body of water or a negative edge of some sort that nobody did anything different there. They just built it like a normal pool. And why is it failing? Why is it failing? And I've seen where they've replaced the tile on the outside of a raised body, raised bond beam pool 3 times. And they're just at a loss. We keep fixing it. They just keeps falling off. And I go, well, we got to fix the inside, guys. There's nothing we can stick out here that will hold up very well. There's some options, but not very many if we don't fix the inside first. Higher strength shotcrete solves some of those problems too. That's the reason we use higher strength shotcrete. It's required because of the density and the durability of the concrete, because it's in constant contact with water. Doing those things solves a lot of those problems. Negative edges are the hardest to build, structure to do, like actually do the work. Most people do it incorrectly the way they do it because they won't form it up. They're working with a shotcrete crew that sort of knows how to do that process. They're using lightweight concrete. They're not using high strength concrete, and then they don't waterproof it. So like all those things are a problem, and they just compound. And so solving those is a very expensive solution. Even to do it correctly to start is a very expensive solution. It's less than doing it the second time, but to do it right, most people don't know, don't care, and aren't willing to spend the money, right? And so those are things right off the bat that make us charge a lot more money to do the pool, because the method, the process, and the materials will be different. Even though the end result for the client is the same, in theory, day one. But then that changes over time, right? So and that's our sales process too. That's why you're paying me more money. We're going to train the subs. There's tile guys that will install glass tile on a spa tomorrow with just standard thin set and let it go. They'll be trying to make cuts. They'll do all kinds of things. And it falls apart. It doesn't work. It won't hold up. There's a very specific method to do glass tile in general. And then each manufacturer has their own specific details they make you do so that it can work. And most guys won't even go on the internet to read that, So if you're doing a oceanside glass tile or light stream glass tile job, if you go to their websites, they have a very specific protocol. And so you have this brand new job and you got $40 a square foot material, and you bring out the tile crew and they just install it. Nobody's paid attention. Well, if you would have just spent 10 minutes and read their website, you would have explained, you might not even understand it, but at least you could talk to the tile guys about doing it right.
Right.
And not be spending, $20,000 to replace a spa job later.
So how do you choose which kind of manufacturers and different, parts and things that you use? Do you guys use companies like Wet Edge and things like that?
So two things drive what we use as product: the quality of the product and the quality of the customer, or the representation from the company, right? We use mostly Pentair equipment. They have the widest range and the highest quality equipment. At the same time, a Jandy variable speed pump and a Pentair variable speed pump are comparable pumps. Okay, Pentair, for me, because of what we do, the wide range of products all the way from plumbing parts and skimmers all the way through chemical controllers makes it important to me, because we automate 90% of our pools. They all have chemical controllers, and it's all one seamless equipment set that all works together and talks. They don't have a bubbler like you put in a Baja shelf that I like, though. It's ugly to me. But Jandy and Savvy make a really cool one that's really, really small, very, very unintrusive. You almost don't see it. We use those all the time because it's a better product, right? Jandy supports me well. Pentair supports me well. A&A in-floor versus Paramount in-floor. They both make great products. They both have a few things different than each other that it might be better or worse than each other. And they both worry about customer care. But so far, I've done only mostly Paramount work because they have similar quality product, and I've had unbelievable customer service from them that take care of me and my clients really well. Pentair, same thing. Those companies, I have a really good friend that started working for a competitive company that I don't buy from, and he's begging me to buy from him. And I'm like, it won't happen unless these guys screw it up. Pentair stands behind their stuff so well. Paramount stands behind their stuff so well that I would be crazy to not use them unless their stuff was really inferior. And if that starts happening, we'll move, because we want to provide the best equipment and the best customer care, right? Luckily, just like anything, the subcontractors and everything else, relationships are 90% of the business, right? If I'm we've seen people get, I don't use Pentair equipment, their customer service sucks. Well, I bet you could say that about all of that guy's relationships, because he sucks. Right? So, or he doesn't want to know what he's doing correctly, and he keeps complaining about shit breaking or not working because he never set it up to work.
Or he just expects them to do things for him.
Right.
Yeah.
They call him and ask him to do hydraulics or figure out problems, and they're like, well, this isn't our problem, bro. We don't do that.
Right.
At some level, they'll try to help, but obviously at some point it's not worth them doing that. And so we try to pick the best products we can buy. I luckily am not competing on price usually, right? And so I don't care if a Jandy pump's $10 cheaper than Pentair. If they're both comparable pumps and I can do a complete set out of Pentair equipment, that's what we're going to do. We get a better warranty. It all controls itself the same. The automation talks to the same. I know the parts in my warehouse to fix it are the same.
We're designed to work together.
Yeah, they all work together. You try to put a Pentair chemical controller and a Jandy automation panel, we can rig it. I can make it work. I can get it to trigger things, but it won't work like it should. And so that's why we choose where we're at. But the industry changes all the time, and new parts and pieces come out. Paramount has what I think is one of the best skimmers. That's what skimmer we use. Regardless if Pentair makes a skimmer, I don't care. They don't make as good a one as Paramount does, so we use their skimmer.
They do have some nice skimmers.
Yeah.
And what's the one? Is it the one the main drain pulls and puts into the other skimmer basket, the leaf canister?
Leaf canister.
Yeah. Have you been doing a lot more of those lately?
We still do. I mean, most of our pools here have in-floor for two reasons. One, we have a debris that is managed very well with in-floor. It's truly not the most efficient way to clean a pool, right? But the systems work really well, and most of those will have a leaf system using their a debris canister and a leaf drain, and we use a lot of them. They're not perfect by any means. A perfect pool would have no penetrations and no drains and nothing, but it's got to function, right? And so we do our best with in-floor systems to make them look as good. And some of our pools are so big, there's really not an option, right? We've got 140,000 gallon pools. Well, you're not going to put a vacuum in there.
Yeah.
You need 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, 4 vacuums.
And they'd be fighting each other. You can play with robots too at some level, but when you got bar stools and you got, canopies, and they just don't work. And so you got to kind of compromise to make the system work for the client. The circulation with an in-floor system is 100% better than a returns around the top of a pool. So there's benefits that you trade off, and when done right, they work extremely well. When done wrong, they suck. And they had a bad reputation for years because the products weren't that good either. And we currently have guys trying to jump into that market and build a better mousetrap for a whole lot less money because they're bottom line driven, and those systems sort of work, but they're not going to work like they should.
Well, they're designed to work a certain way, and I don't think a lot of the builders understand exactly where the head should be placed in the pool and how they're supposed to work together and not fight each other. A lot of times you'll see they're fighting each other, they're blowing things in different directions, and you're like, who put this in? Why are these heads here? Or there's like nine heads on the steps. It's like,
right.
What? And then there's like 4 on the bottom. And it's like, man, you can't. The steps are clean,
right?
Like,
cool. Well, and locating skimmers and returns, and if you just throw stuff on a page and say, well, it needs a skimmer, we'll put one in. If it needs a light, we'll put one in. If we put returns, we'll put them in. But if we plan some of that, if there's a skimmer and we put a return on the other side of the pool shooting towards the skimmer, that's a good idea. Maybe that'll work better. But I've seen pools that have a skimmer and on a corner and a return right next to the skimmer shooting everything past the skimmer. Like,
right.
Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, guys. And you would think common sense would prevail. Sometimes not.
Mm-hmm.
But and by far we're not perfect. We've made our list of mistakes, and anybody could probably walk any of my projects and tell me something they do different or what they think's better. But we're doing our best to listen, pay attention, learn, and do what we can to make it serviceable, live a long time, and above all, look awesome if we can.
Nice. Do you guys install many covers? I feel like you don't see very many of those out here.
You don't, and we do some covers, not many.
And I know it's hard because you do a lot more like free-forming pools because they're custom.
Yep, there's systems for those too, and we've worked with those, but a lot of the bigger pools won't get a cover, and most people in Arizona don't want a cover. Should we have a cover on every pool? Oh yeah, I mean efficiency-wise, absolutely. Monsoon season, wouldn't we wish we could put a cover on every pool? It's such a nuisance. The most cover systems are so ugly and such a pain. And we do them. We've done many different systems out here, but they break early. They don't get maintained. When they break, they just let them roll them up in the box and leave them there. And so we don't do a lot of them. If we could do every pool with a Hydrolux out of the floor, or we could do a HydroFloor system where the pool floor comes up and closes the pool, we would do that. But they're so expensive that most people don't touch them.
How expensive is something like that?
Well, so like a Hydrolux system coming out of the floor, if a typical rectangle pool, you're doing a undermounted track system, and you're spending $6,000 on that or something. A Hydrolux system's about 15 to 20. And then if you go to a movable floor system, we're talking 200 to 300 grand, and so,
wow.
And we've done both, and we'd love to do them always the same way, but they're pretty complex and expensive, and most people are looking to go swimming, and in some areas they're starting to try to require that stuff too for water efficiency and stuff, but they're so cumbersome, that most people aren't willing to, and they really restrict, your creativity. I mean, there's only so much you can do. Even the undermounted ones where we can deal with free forms and shapes and they can move around and work really well and push button, they're still really constricting to your creativity and the shape of the yard. So I think they'll always have a place for them. But they're never going to be a massive stay in the industry. They're just tough to work with.
If you had a pool service and repair division, how would you be pricing the pools that you build?
To service them?
Yeah. How would you judge being there on a weekly basis, once or twice a week? And just what math calculation would you do in charging a customer for a certain rate? So
the problem is that you guys we used to service pools. We really never made it work great just because we didn't commit to it. We were doing it with existing staff. And the problem is to do it right is expensive, right? Even if the pool works good. And what would typically happen is we do a really large pool. We'd figure out what we think it's going to take to service it. We'd be charging those rates. And in the beginning, everybody loves it. It's great. The pool is spotless. It's always taken care of. We're maintaining our own equipment set. We know that people aren't tweaking stuff. But a month or 2 or 6 or 12 go by and they're like, this guy's hardly ever here. I'm paying a whole bunch of money. My neighbor pays $50, $20 a week for this guy to come out. I'm paying $400 a month. It's almost $100 every trip. This is crazy. And they come back to us and say, you got to lower your prices or I'm going to hire somebody else. And we're like, hire somebody else. The way I would, if it was me in the perfect world, you'd charge by time, material, and mark it up. Nobody wants to do that, right? They want to write a $100 a month check. And if you're doing your job really well, they won't see you and it's going to look perfect.
All right.
And so they're going to complain because you're never here. Well, I've got it all set up the way it should be. As soon as they fire you and they hire the guy for $75 a month and it starts turning green, then they're mad at him and they fight through it and they work through it. They forget that the reason it wasn't green is because I was on top of it. I was adjusting things when they need to be adjusted. I changed settings. I sped pumps up. It's a tough industry. If it was me, you could maybe get a flat fee that would give you a base amount of hours, but every time you had to do anything else, you got to charge for it, man. When the monsoon comes, they don't want to pay you more. I'm like, well, you realize, we like this year we've had 3 or 4 massive ones, right? Well, every cartridge filter's had to be changed no matter what, or cleaned no matter what. That's not always that way. We can have a summer with none of that. Right. So, but they're not willing to pay the difference, right? And so it's a really tough industry. But for us, when we were doing it, we were sort of packaging it, but we pretty much charged on top of our labor for anything we have to do. If we're breaking down filters and cleaning filters, there's a charge for each one of those. Our chemicals are a certain much per month. If we blow by that, though, we're going to ask for more money. But we really set our pools up. I think most of our pools are really as much automation as they can be because of the cost of the pool. And so the time on site's minimized at some level. But when you do, we've got a pool in Chandler that's got 4 cartridge filters on it. It's got 16 pumps. It's got 9 skimmers. No matter what you do, you're going to spend some time there. And when you do have to do filter cleans and changes, it's a day. You're going to be there a while. And so it's tough to really manage that for clients because they start seeing those costs. And I think over time they really whine about it. But for us, if it's set up well, and that's your guys' other problem is you get a crappy setup pool. They don't want to pay you any more than a good setup pool. And a good setup pool, you have to be there less, so they don't want to pay you at all necessarily. Like, well, my pool builder said to take care of itself. It's automated. You're right. It's going to take care of chlorine and pH, but it won't deal with alkalinity. It won't deal with any other problems. It's not going to deal with total dissolved solids. It's not going to check your, and they don't get that. And so it's a tough world, but I would definitely, I'm sure I would charge more than anybody else in the industry to do it right. Because you're also, if you don't pay enough, you can't hold on to an employee, right? I mean, if you pay a guy $7 an hour to ride around in a truck and wear a tank top and smoke dope once in a while and sweep a pool, he won't be around very long. Right. But if you got to pay him $25 an hour and put him in a nice truck and teach him stuff and send him through the education program, you're going to have to charge way more than, $20 a trip. You got to start charging the client $150, $200 a month to manage their pool correctly. And most clients are, they just don't pay it no matter how much money they have. They think that that's crazy, especially when a neighbor's getting theirs done for less or their kid does it But yeah, it's just like anything else. As you get, like we struggle on the construction side, you guys are struggling on the service side. The more people you get educated on the service side, the more they'll start charging, and the more you'll be able to start charging. A lot of people look at it as competition, right? Why? Like I help pool builders all over the valley and country for that matter, and I teach classes, and even guys like Jeremy, we've mentored each other on different problems or issues. They're like, why would you help your competition? Hey, the smarter he is, the more he charges.
Right.
Right. Same thing in service. If all the service guys knew what you guys know, they'd be charging the right price. You could actually make a living. If everybody else, I walk into a house and they've talked to California pools. I'm not going to pick on them, but let's say they've talked to California pools. I can't then walk in an hour later and say, these guys know what the hell they're doing. Now, I can prove that they are missing it in a lot of places, okay? But the client says they do 300 pools a year. These guys obviously know what they're doing.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, they do in general terms, right? But when we start, putting a pool on a roof with parking Lamborghinis underneath it, do they know what they're doing? Maybe not. Now, will they try to do that pool? Well, maybe not California, but there's some other guys similar to that would certainly try. Sure. And then they'll let us clean up the mess, right?
By the way, that is my favorite pool that you guys have done. That pool is so badass.
That's a cool pool. And that was a different contractor before we designed and built it. It was priced out and we were way more expensive. We luckily negotiated properly and got the job. But the guys that were going to build the job would have never even come close to making it look and operate the way it should. Right. And so those are the things, though. If I would rather that company I was competing against know more, because the more they know, man, the better we are as a group to be competitive. And I don't, I've never once ran through a job after Jeremy priced a job and then met with a client and wanted that work. I'm like, if you've already talked to Jeremy, man, you get the right guy, just use him. Yeah. Could I go in there and undersell the crap out of him and find a way to get that job to stick it to him? I probably could, especially if I'm the number 2 guy in and I can leverage what I can leverage and vice versa. But he'd do the same to me if I was doing that to him. I don't have any inclination to do that. If he's got a good client with a great job and he does a good work out in the field, I have no interest in taking his work.
All right.
If he's already talked to the client, they're talking to a good one, but if I'm talking to the client, they're talking to 2 other bad ones, I would refer him. You got, these guys that are building this pool for 150 and I'm at 200. You think I'm crazy? Do me a favor. Call Jeremy. Have him price the pool. And then you'll hire one of us at around 200. Right. Then you at least won't think I'm crazy. So
yeah, that's bad business. Do it any other way.
Yep. And that's what his tributary group and Genesis, at some level, that's the intent of those two is bring the industry up. Not me, not you. Bring the whole industry because the whole industry needs it, right?
It'll wash everybody out.
And that's why you guys are doing this. You're not on a podcast to learn about how to do pools for yourself necessarily. You're doing it for both. But the other thing is I want the rest of the industry to start paying attention, up their game, charge the prices they're due, as long as you do it. The problem is some of them try to charge it and aren't worth it. But if you really are worth it and you can prove it, then you can charge it. And then your competition is much, much less to actually be in competition with. Because just like you, I can do, $20,000, $50,000 pools and make so much money. I can do 4 $200,000 pools and probably make more money, right? Have 4 clients, super happy, and I put more money into their jobs and I built them better. As soon as you start cheaping them up and building them cheaper, your cost over time go up too, because now you got to manage problems way sooner. So there's a big benefit to that. And the industry I love giving back to them. I love being the guy they call when they got questions. I love having a guy like Justin, who you guys had in here too, that will call me when he's got a question or vice versa. I'm like, hey, I'm doing this pool. This is what I'm doing. I just did that for somebody else. Let me work it out. That's the benefit of belonging to a tributary, a Genesis, and creating those relationships is because you now have this massive group of people you can talk to. And when you're doing something you've never done before, but somebody brings it to the table, you can go, man, I think I saw Skip do a pool just like this. Right. And he'll pick up the phone. We'll talk about it, give me positive feedback. I can hire him if I need to for consulting fees. But either way, I now have a resource that gives me the comfort level. And you can say, here's what we did that didn't work. Here's what we solved it. Here's what I would do if I were you. And then you won't have that problem. That's worth so much money, man, to have that comfort level and not guess. And sure. I think a lot of guys that want to be highly competitive, like, well, I'm not going to ask him because he won't really help me. And if he does help me, I'm going to look like, be humble, bro.
Yeah.
What do you got to lose?
Well, and like I said, there's 100 guys in this industry that do what we do or do it better than we do it, or do something better than we do for sure. And we can learn from that or use them as a resource. And if I help them, they help me later. It's really worth it,
Yeah, it just raises the bar. Then you all know how to do it better.
Everything I have in life is because I put my pride aside. I was too scared and I said, screw that. I don't give a shit. Like, I'm going to ask.
Yep.
Everything I have is because I put that aside and just did it.
Experience is huge, just like education. But a lot of times that experience, let somebody else has done it. You don't have, you can break your own glass ceilings when you want to, when you need to. But if you don't need to, hire somebody. That's what, that's like the local built market when the company that was going to do that rooftop pool before we took the job. before they called us because they were the general contractor was concerned they didn't know what they're doing. Those guys should have built that pool. You know what they should have done though? They should have said, hey, this is outside of what we normally do. Let's call Red Rock or, Skip Phillips or Brian or Dave Peterson. Let's have them help us design and manage the problems we can't manage so we can build this pool. And they would have got the contract. They would have learned a ton and they would have a killer pool in their profile. Right. Instead, they put their head down. We're going to build this thing. They underpriced the crap out of it. When they started getting challenged by the architect and the GC with some questions they couldn't really answer, they lost the job. What they should have said is, we can do this job. It's a little bit outside of what we normally do. We're going to bring in an expert that we know can do it. We're going to work together as a team, and we're going to knock this pool out. And now they'd be able to do those pools more, right? Why would you fight against that? But it's typical not to, So sure. It's a weird world.
Yeah.
So quickly, anything what would you recommend to someone trying to get into the pool building process?
Education, big time. I mean, obviously, use the people that you can have around you that have a experience doing it. But my experience in this so far is a majority of the trades and builders out there haven't done what they should do to really know what they're doing. So you might learn bad things too. There is a ton of education available, and there's a ton of resources for it. Step up your game and get it. Whether you've been building pools for a day or 10 years. There's always something to learn. I still take classes on a regular basis. I teach classes and then I take them, and then we create new classes. Even when I teach the class I've already taken and taught twice, I still learn something, especially from somebody else in the room bringing something up.
Sure. Will you be in Vegas the end of October?
Yep, I'll be in Vegas
doing Genesis class.
I'm gonna be. So we've redesigned our construction and our advanced construction course manuals. So I'm in Ohio in October I'm going to actually just be in there to mentor while they're teaching, to clean up the new textbook as we do it. So as they're going through the process of teaching the class, I'm going to be in the back making all the changes I see us needing to make, and what maybe something we forgot, or maybe we got something we got to take out. I'm going to do that there because that's our construction school, our basic. And then in Vegas, I'm doing the same thing on our advanced. The same guys that teach most of those classes will be teaching it just like normal. Bill Drakely, Dave Peterson, Paula Benedetti, they'll be teaching the course, but I'm going to be there to manage figuring out how we got to make our textbook better. As a group, we got complacent, right? We're the only guys doing this for the most part. We're killing everybody and we're just adding classes. We regrouped and said, we got to fix and make our other classes better. They're 15-year-old, PowerPoint presentations that have been piled together. Let's turn this into a textbook manual that's done correctly. And so that's awesome. What we're doing now. But I'll absolutely be there. I'll be in Ohio to do the first part of that. And I think that's at Master Pools Guild group function. Mm-hmm. But anybody can go to that if they want to, take basic construction, bite the bullet, buy the airplane ticket, get there. There's plenty of seats available probably. And then same thing in Vegas. We're doing advanced hydraulics, intro to hydraulics, I think, in Vegas. And we're doing advanced construction in Vegas. Again, if you and we have some service stuff too, but even if you're a service guy, if you really want to be a good service guy and you're thinking about moving into the construction world, that's your start. Go sit down and take some classes. You take that one class and you'll know more knowledge about pool construction than every single builder you're already servicing their pools for. Really. I mean, there's very few that have taken the step to do that. So you'll be, light years ahead of those guys.
Definitely agree with all of that. So we're going to be in Vegas as well. We're actually going to have a booth there. I don't think anybody knows that yet, but we're actually going to be in Vegas and we have a little surprise for everybody, but we are definitely going to have a booth there. So hopefully, we can talk with you. We're thinking about doing a documentary that starts here in Arizona and goes through the whole thing. So maybe we can chop it up with you and maybe some of the other Genesis guys.
Absolutely.
We love what you guys are doing and we definitely think it's the most impressive program by far in the industry. And I think as you guys raise that, bar, CPO and all these other, training divisions are going to be doing the same thing. We hope anyway.
Well, remember CPOs now, Genesis and CPO are owned by the same group now. So there's crossover that, right? So the National Swimming Pool Foundation has now bought Genesis, and that's part of what's helping us really interject more time and money and efforts, because now we got a big organization behind us as well. And that's the same group that puts on the CPO courses. And so the cross connection is we're creating a service program too, between just more than just the CPO course, that's but awesome. Like business side of it and the construction side of the service side. So you're not just And then we also have a killer renovation school now too, which is great for service companies because they're starting to delve into let's redo interiors. And some of the lipstick stuff where it's just new finishes is one thing, but now we teach a course on what can you actually do though. Can we add a spa? How do we do it? Can we break down a wall and put it back together and do different stuff? So we have a whole 2-day course on that now too that really covers those pieces. So there's a good fit somewhere in the middle, and then there's a bunch of design, right? There's a bunch of either architecturally styled design and drafting and rendering, perspective drawings, and then just basics, color theory, weird stuff like that you don't think is important. Sit through one of those classes with Faraz and learn about color theory, and you start understanding how people react to colors, how colors react to the environment, and how that creates the backyard and how to put those together. And that's why when you see a job that's designed by somebody that has all that, you go, oh shit, man. I mean, bam, it's there, versus somebody that just threw all that crap out in the backyard with all the features. And you're like, it looks like that.
All right.
You can start seeing the difference. And so you got to kind of get a broad spectrum of that education. But the pieces and parts of the construction side, that's the start. And it's like crack. You'll have one of those classes and you'll be like, the next one's wait 3 months. Why do I got to wait 3 months? How can I get one sooner? Right. There's a lot to it. That's what got Jeremy drawn into it. I mean, once you kind of delve into that a little bit, you really learn how much you don't know, how much you can learn, and then the guys that you can learn from is priceless.
Yeah, I love how specific a lot of those classes are. I mean, they have one, isn't it, just equipment sets or choosing equipment?
So the construction program has like a number of classes built into it, and so one of those is how to figure out a equipment set. You'll also see us do a lot of 1-hour short programs, which are all those are free if you come to the expo, right? So that's how I got sucked into Genesis. I went to the expo. I was a pussy. I didn't spend any money. Just went there. Got to the show, figured I'd go in and look around at all the pool stuff, and it's the same crap. It's pumps and filters and glass tile and whatever. But every morning before the expo, they have a bunch of presenters doing 1 and 2 hour little segments of stuff, and it's either problems with glass tile install, how to operate a chlorinator, how to set up your equipment set correctly. Even if it's just an hour, you'll have Paulo Benedetti come in and explain why he does his equipment set the way he does, and you'll be like, well, holy shit, I never thought to do this before that and that.
Sure.
And those are the little things like service guys can just sit. And once you sit in one of those and you see the interaction, you see the guys else teaching the class, and then you maybe don't know who he is. You pull up his website. You're like, God damn, these guys, look at the shit they build. Yeah. We'll be doing a 1-hour seminar on advanced construction and elevated construction projects where we bring in structures and cantilever decks and some of these bigger construction phases and what we do. What that looks like, and show you details of some of those jobs, like the rooftop pool you saw. We'll show you how we designed and constructed that.
Do you think you could maybe ask them to do more on social media? Because I think for what Genesis has would be seriously game changing if they had more of a presence.
It's coming. I've got to run, but that's a huge fail of ours, is not having that presence. It's in the works. I promise you. You'll see between Genesis and the Society of Water Shape Designers, there's going to be a big monster push of us getting not only the pool builders to see it, but the consumers and the architects and the buyers to start seeing what we do. So
awesome.
All right. Well,
plug Red Rock real quick. Yeah. Where can we find you?
You can find us on our website at buildredrock.com. Jump on anything House, Facebook. You'll see a lot of our up-to-date stuff. We work nationally and internationally on design and consulting. I've got projects in 5 different states currently. Some that we're building, some that we're just consulting on design, and some that we're doing forensic and expert witness stuff on. So we're a great resource if you're a pool builder or a service contractor. If you've got questions or you think there's something we've done, you could use some help to get something done. Reach out to us, send us an email, and we'll try to get back to you and give you some feedback. Or if you're, we'll try to help. We're here to help the industry. We're here to make it better. And we're willing to take help from other people as well. Maybe you're servicing one of my pools and you hate it for some reason. Let me know. Let's figure out what we can do different.
Right.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Rick. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We truly appreciate you giving us your time and your ear. We know how important and valuable that is. So thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, you can reach us at poolchasers.info@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our tag is Pool Chasers. If you guys could take a minute and go to Apple Podcasts to rate and review the podcast, we would truly appreciate it.
See you out there, Pool Chasers.